Now, it's the Law Show on CL 650. A comprehensive look at everything you need to know about the law. Now, here's Sterling Fox.
Well, good morning, and welcome to the Law Show here on CIL 650. The subject of the program this morning is immigration law, and it's a real pleasure to welcome back to the program Gordon Maynard and Rudy Kischer from the law firm Maynard, Kischer, Stojicevic, immigration and citizenship lawyers in Vancouver. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Good morning, Sterling.
Good morning, Sterling. Great to be here.
Good morning to both of you. Gordon, your name goes first on the marquee, so tell us a little bit about the firm and about your involvement with it.
Maynard, Kischer, Stojicevic has been a law firm since 2002. It was started by myself and Alex Stojicevic. We had both been practicing immigration law in Vancouver for a number of years in another law firm. We started up our own law firm in Yaletown. We were joined by Rudy, and we've been Maynard, Kischer, Stojicevic ever since. And we've been together now for, how long, Rudy?
10 years coming up.
10 years now.
Okay. Right. And you joined the firm. You're the most recent arrival, although that was 10 years ago.
That was 10 years ago this fall.
Were you an immigration lawyer before joining this firm, Rudy?
Yes, I was immigration. I just spent a year working with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees over in Hong Kong, and then I'd been back for about 2 years working at another firm here in Vancouver, also doing only immigration law, and then I joined them.
Okay. Gordon said just moments before we turned on our microphones this morning that it's a fast-changing world in which we conduct our business these days. And I don't doubt that for a second, so much so that we've had a sea change in immigration law in just the past few weeks, Gordon. As of January 1st, describe the changes that have taken place to Canadian immigration law since January 1.
Mm-hmm. On January 1st, 2015, just a week or two ago, the government commenced what's called express entry. And this is the process that the government uses to select economic immigrants to Canada. Now, in a previous show, we talked about the different kind of immigrants that come to Canada. Mm-hmm. We talked about family law immigrants or family class immigrants.
Right, okay.
We talked about refugees coming to Canada, but the largest component of immigrants to Canada are the economic class immigrants.
People who move here seeking a better life, right?
They come here on the basis of their ability to integrate economically into Canada.
Right.
They're going to come here and contribute economically.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to find a job. They're going to have a job. They're going to pay taxes straight away. They're going to be able to support themselves.
Okay.
So they're selected on their capacity to integrate economically. So that process has been in place for a number of years, different categories under that stream. And now what the government has done is introduced, they've just put a complete new layer over top of that, commencing January 2015. And that's express entry, and it's a new way of processing those immigrants. At least that's what the government says. It's a new process, not changing the categories.
Rudy, what happens if on the day of the change, and we're less than 3 weeks into this new system, right, as it's only January 1st, what happens if you were in the system on December 31st? Do you lose your place in line? Has it been so revamped that you're lost all over again? What happens to those already in the works?
Well, the government has said that they will continue to process those people. So you are not going to qualify under the express entry. You'd have to make a separate application. But if you've already applied, your application is sitting there, and the government says they will eventually get to it, and they have sort of stated processing times. Unfortunately, what we've seen in the past with this is the government, when it starts a new program, prioritizes that program and says, well, this is a better way for us to select immigrants. It gives priority to that. And what we've seen in the past is those other applications that were being processed in about 12 months to 14 months, they start to languish, and it gets slower and it gets slower, and they don't get processed. Next thing we're looking at 2 to 3 years. People start complaining. They say, well, we have this new process that we're using. If you want to, please
reapply.
You reapply and use that process. Now, the government hasn't said that's what's going to happen. They're said they're committed to processing those, but in the past we've seen that those applications that applied in 2008, for example, they sat there and languished until they redid the program, said we're simply not going to get those. We're not going to get to those, and you're going to be stuck waiting.
Right.
So we were in a rush at our office in December to make sure that we got applications in for people, before this new system started, because if they weren't in that system, they weren't going to be in the line at all. And so we wanted to make sure we at least had them in queue. But, we were clear to our clients there's a risk that they may not get processed because we don't know what the time frames are going to be. We can't guarantee that.
You're balancing two things there. The government gave the community at large warning that express entry was going to come into place on January 1st.
Right.
But they didn't give out the details about it. Those came out piecemeal as January 1st approached.
Right.
And so even now, people are trying to come to grips with how the new system works. And so they warned people in the months leading up to January 1st that if you're going to apply under the existing categories, do so now, because after December 31st, you won't be able to. After December 31st, you will have to go to express entry. So lots of people put in applications prior to December 31st just to make sure that they were in a process that they understood, that they qualified for. Now the government has to process both streams simultaneously.
And it's possible that you could come up twice then, right? With your new application in the new stream, but you're still in the old one.
People are trying to balance right now whether they should now also apply under express entry and have both going. There's nothing that prevents them from doing so, aside from the new rules that come into place.
Rudy, the knock on the immigration ministry for decades has been its slowness, the glacial pace at which Immigration Canada has functioned. Is this new system, barely days old, designed to address that specifically, to relieve the backlog?
Yes, that's the promise. Under the old system, you were able to file an application that may not have had all the pieces that were required. You may not have had a language test done. You may not have your education credentials evaluated. You wouldn't have a criminal record done, criminal record check done.
Background.
Under this new system, what they're saying is, we're going to let you get all that stuff together before you file this application. We're going to give you a set time period to file the application. That way we're going to have all the material in front of us when we assess your application.
Right.
At number one. And number two, we're going to control who gets to actually put an application. Before, if you met the qualifications, you were able to put an application in. Now you have to jump into you have to get what's called an invitation to apply, an ITA, which means they're going to control the amount of applications they get, and that way they're hoping is going to prevent any backlog from accumulating.
Well, this is somewhat easy, and I'm being facetious. Okay, it's a chore to get through sitting here in Canada, Gordon. What if you're a person applying to come to Canada from some distant point on the planet? You're that much further removed from all of these changes and the mechanisms of government. How do we handle people applying from afar? Are they just really, it's a crapshoot?
Oh, never mind people from afar. People within Canada are having trouble dealing with the new system and understanding how it works. Lawyers are having trouble with the new system and understanding.
I believe
how it
that.
works.
Yes, I do.
I think there is
Speak for yourself, Gordon.
I am having trouble understanding how it works. I don't hesitate to say that.
Right.
I read the other day there was word out statistics about how many people had attempted to enter this new system, and it was in the thousands. I think the numbers were in the order of 10,000 attempts, and of those, only a third of them actually succeeded in entering into the system, putting their name into the initial pool. They just didn't qualify. And I get calls right now from existing clients who say, well, gee, Bob down the hall says that he can now be processed under express entry in 6 months. Can we do it? Well, you got to read the fine print. No, Bob needs to take a language test first. Bob needs to qualify in one of the categories. Then Bob has to jump into the pool. Then Bob has to be drawn out of the pool. And all of this may take a year. So there is no 6 months. 6 months was what was put out there into the public domain as a reason why this was going to be a good system. Maybe 6 month processing. 6 months processing from when? From when they decide they're going to start processing your application. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Let's talk about what the categories are, the way they existed on December 31st, and then see what changed on January 1st.
Okay, and Gordon, you identified most of these changes being aimed at economic category applicants. And Rudy, back in the day, I'm thinking back to the Mulroney era when this whole business of economic class really was, it really came to the fore. Is an economic class potential immigrant to Canada required to have X number of dollars available in cash to bring into the country? Is that, it's not, you're not bribing us to come in, but you're buying your way into the country. That's what Mulrooney did. Is that still out there?
I think that's a misinterpretation, especially for this program, the skilled worker program. You're expected to have a certain amount of money under the skilled worker class with you. That is a very low amount. It's basically what they take a look at what's called a low income cutoff rate, which for an individual, let's say, would be about $16,000, and then they take about half of that, which is about $8,000, and say, well, you need to have about $8,000 available in liquid funds that you could use on your arrival, which only makes sense.
Well, of course.
That it's going to take 6 months maybe to find a job, to get adjusted, etc. So that requirement is there, but it's not a sense of buying your way into Canada. It's having enough resources that you're not going to become a burden of the state when you arrive.
You're not becoming instantly dependent.
And then they also give an exemption for that if you're already working in Canada. For the most part, you don't have to provide that. If you already have a job offer that's been vetted by the government, then you don't need that because you already have employment. So you can get an exemption from that if you have a job offer.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, in terms of economic buying your way in, I think that's more associated with the investor program.
That's it.
Which the government has cut back. The federal program has been cut back significantly. We had a very robust program that was letting in somewhere between 3,000 and 6,000 immigrants a year federally. Mm-hmm. That program has been closed now for over 2 years. So if somebody wanted to immigrate for BC, for example, in the past we were able to allow somebody that had a net worth of $1.6 million and was willing to invest with the Canadian government $800,000. They would, and had 2 years of business experience. So it wasn't a straight you're buying your way in. You had to have some business experience. You had that, you would then be able to apply. That program's been closed for 2 years, and it really hasn't been successfully replaced federally. So right now, when somebody comes to me and they're an entrepreneur and they say, I've done well for myself. I'd like to immigrate. I'm worth $1.6 million. I'm willing to give the government $800,000, lend them $800,000 for 5 years. I have to tell them it doesn't work. You're going to have to find a job in Canada. We really don't have a program that's going to fit you easily.
Right. The economic category, what express entry applies to,
right,
is really the three streams of applicants where we get most of our immigrants to Canada. What you're talking about, the investor category, is a very small
right, and Rudy's
portion.
just identified that, right. But so, in many Canadians' minds, that is still, and even though it's been canceled for a couple of years, I think if push came to shove and you started questioning people at Granville and Georgia on any given day, most of them would go, it's closed? Really? Oh, gosh, I had no idea.
They remember the headlines. They don't know the details.
Right. Now,
the economic streams that we're dealing with here are what's called the CEC category, Canada Experience Class, the FSW category, which is Federal Skilled Worker, and the Federal Skilled Trades. Let's call them FST. These are the three categories that make up mainly our economic immigrants. CEC was a class designed for people who were in Canada already. They were working here. Mm-hmm. They had work permits. They were working in good jobs, had to be skilled jobs, what they call OA or B jobs. Okay? They had to work for at least a year in a job, and they had to pass a language test and get a pretty good score in it. And if you did those two things, you were eligible to apply for immigration. Those were the minimum requirements of that category.
Okay.
So people already here, working in a good job, language test. Okay. The other category, Federal Skilled Worker, that was for people, and that was the point system. That's where Bob comes forward and says, I want to immigrate to Canada. I'm 40 years old. I've got 10 years of work experience in this kind of industry. I've got this sort of education. My wife speaks English. My education is such and such. Mm-hmm. And they assign points to that. And if you meet the points, you get selected. Right? And a good chunk of those points, a real nice chunk of those points, came if you were already working in Canada and you had an employer that wanted to keep you.
Right, okay.
And this is where you had the employer support. This was called arranged employment. So that was a really good category also for people who were working in Canada. Okay? And then there's Federal Skilled Trade, which is very much like the Federal Skilled Worker Program, except it's aimed at tradespeople. So it's a slightly different point system, and it's based on designated occupations in the trades area where we feel we've been short of these people in our economy, in the industrial sector.
Well, we saw headlines in British Columbia papers just in the past few days, and there's even a commercial for the government running, the provincial government running, saying basically over the next 10 years, our province alone is going to need 1 million skilled workers just to accomplish all of the fabulous mega projects we have in mind. So if that number applies only to BC, imagine if all of the plans were to be fulfilled, the number of skilled workers we would require across Canada. So is that program, is this new express entry all about accommodating the volumes we're going to need down the road?
It's not. It's not. You know, what was the problem with the old system? The answer is not much. You know, the old system worked in the sense that if you had somebody in front of you saying, I want to immigrate to Canada, you could look at those 3 categories and you say, well, you fit that one, or you fit that one, or
right.
If you do this, you could fit them. It had predictability. You know, the person could line themselves up, meet the requirements, and make their application, and then you waited for the application to be processed. One of the problems was that lots of applications kept coming in.
Sure.
All right, and so the line would get bigger. So you'd be waiting for the applications
It's almost
to be
like
processed.
you had an airplane. You only took 250,000 seats on the airplane, but you could sell as many tickets as you wanted.
Right,
exactly.
right.
Exactly.
Festival seating on airplane. Now, wouldn't that be something?
And so you did have these backlogs building up. But what the government did then was they would set quotas. They'd say, we're only going to accept X thousand of these applications this year. And once the quota was reached, they'd put the word out there and say, no more applications in that area. And that worked as a means of controlling the number of applications that came in, but it didn't get rid of the backlog that existed. You still had to work through that.
Right.
So there was that issue. There was delay. All right. Now the government has said, we're going to deal with that. This is why they advertise it as being, this is going to be 6 months processing.
Right.
This is our new management tool.
Mm-hmm.
This is how we're going to deal with it. And we're going to match foreign workers with employers in Canada. We're going to help them meet up. Okay? And so that's the name they give to this, is express entry, and it's a new way of managing the applications. What's different about it, Rudy? What's different about it?
Well, to me, the biggest difference I find for my clients right now is I used to sell some certainty. People would come to me and they're saying, well, I'm living in Brazil, for example. I'm going to sell everything. I'm going to come to Canada. I'm going to change my job. Am I going to be able to qualify for immigration? I can't say that anymore because I don't know if you're going to be able to qualify.
Even though under the old system, they met every criteria right on the
fluent in
button
English,
and,
several degrees, job offer. I thought before I could say, yeah, you will eventually qualify for immigration. We'll get you a work permit here, and you know that although your kids, you're bringing your kids, you're tearing them out of school, they're going to be here for 2 or 3 years, you're working. I look at the current point system. You know, the government has made a commitment that it'll eventually, you know, process your application. It may take 12 months, it may take 36 months, but you'll get here. I can't say that to a client anymore. I have to change my retainer agreement and now say, we are going to put, we're going to apply for, we're going to put up a profile for you. Hopefully we'll be invited to apply. And then once we apply, depending on who else has applied that month or who else applies in the next 12 months, maybe you'll get pulled out of that pool. So give up your kids, right? Pull your kids out of school, give up your job, sell your assets, come to Canada, start working here.
And cross your fingers.
And cross your fingers and hope that a bunch of other people that are more qualified than you don't apply ahead of you, and you don't get in, because that's a reality of the system now.
Yeah. So the biggest change, the immediate change, is you're not allowed to apply on your own.
Okay.
Right. The government has to give you an invitation to apply.
Okay.
Then they're going to control who applies.
Oh, no, we need to take a break here, but let's leave it at that and find out how to get the all-important invitation to apply.
That's a great story.
Talking immigration law, our guests, Gordon Maynard and Rudy Kischer from Maynard, Kischer, Stojicevic, immigration lawyers here in Vancouver, downtown at 1168 Hamilton Street, and online at vancouverlaw.ca. Here on The Law Show, we're going to take a quick time out. Come right back after this.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.